Hello and welcome to Talking TSM, the Gamehouse's talk show about TSM's LCS team. I'm Robert Haynes and I am your host, your guide into the world of TSM. We got quick announcements before we head into the show. First week of games are done. Very exciting. Very exciting stuff to say the least. We also did our draft buff league last week, thanks to all the Talking TSM friends, I will call them now, that were there for the draft. We had a great time. I was not able to get any TSM players. My roster right now is Someday, God Gilius, Humanoid, FBI, Kaiser, Johnson, and Rogue is my team. This Johnson pick's not looking great, gonna be honest, but we'll live through it. FBI's looking real good though. Someday we'll get better, and we'll get to see Gilius, Humanoid, and Kaiser, and Rogue, my team, in their first games this coming weekend for the LEC. So I'll keep you guys up to date on how I'm doing. I'll let you know if anybody has anything outstanding from the fam who's doing the draft buff league with me. Like I said, every week I think we all had a lot of fun, and again, I would like to encourage you guys, join us in the Talking TSM Discord. It has been an absolute blast so far. Right now we're trying to figure out what happens to the person who comes in last. We've got some pretty decent ideas. I do have a bet with somebody that I'm going to buy them. Specifically, it's Mellery, also known as Benjamin, who's been on the show. That I will buy him an Iconic jersey, as he is a huge fan of Iconic. Should he win it all? So, expect to hear more things about the shenanigans going on within the Talking TSM Discord. Again, just such a great group of people, and we're having a good time in there, and I hope you guys will join us. But enough of that. You guys are here to talk about what happened this weekend, right? About games 1, 2, and 3 of the 2020 season and of the lock-in for TSM. And what a roller coaster. I feel like with TSM, ever since the 2016-2017 team left, we have been on a roller coaster. Just a roller coaster of emotions, of highs and lows, and just everything. It's unbelievable. We walk out of a weekend where I was scared to death that we were going to go 0-3, 2-1. And I don't really know what else to say other than thank you, Spica. I know that he's had some bad play, but in general, I think we can all agree that we should be thanking Spica, because without his miraculous steal, which is becoming less miraculous every time I watch him play, because it's almost expected at this point that the boy is going to be able to steal something in the game. I don't think we come out this weekend with more than maybe one win, and we're staring right in, we're staring a bad time right in the face. But let's just dive into it. I'm going to give my general overall thoughts, and then we're going to dive into the games. So the drafts weren't bad. I will say I almost predicted the exact lineup for TSM. I said Gnar in the top lane. I was hoping for a carry. Graves is a carry for Spica. I figured Orianna is exactly what we wanted for Power of Evil. Did not predict Xayah. I assumed that they would take Kai'Sa or Jhin. They had an opportunity to take Kai'Sa. They didn't. I don't know why. That's been a topic of conversation, to say the least, in terms of how everything kind of went in the TSM, talking TSM Discord. And then Leona or Alistar. I would have preferred Alistar, but TSM banned Alistar because I guess they didn't feel like facing it. So, it was. I didn't really mind the draft that much. They just, the NAR didn't really work for a multitude of reasons. But we'll dive further into that, and then I don't think that the Zaya did anything for me. So, I think I felt like Bjergsen was drafting for our friend Doublelift, who loves Zaya, not for Lost, but that changed later on. The comms in Game 1 had to have been bad. There's just no other way to go about it than they were just bad. I mean, let's just be honest. There were a lot of hiccups and misplays, and it just seemed like there was no proactivity, and that the team was just, it's like they were like asleep, and they were, forgetting how to converse with each other. It just wasn't good. Didn't like it. They were really bad for a game and a half, maybe like a game and 3 quarters, truthfully. And then their talent shone through, and they made big plays, and again, they finished 2-1, so yay. We did expect wins against GG and CLG. While I did predict 100 Thieves to lose to TSM, I did also say they were going to be good this year, and they look solid. They look real good. Outside of a random loss to CLG, beating TL even without Santorin and TSM when they still are figuring out their things, is still impressive. That's a good team. They're not the biggest surprise team. Like, they're not the one that's going to really be challenging. There are 5 good teams in the LCS, and there are potentially some more that we'll have to be watching out for, GG being one of them. With 2 kids coming out of college and really sticking it to TSM in that second game, I was like, oh, man. If we lose this game to GG, there's a lot of questions I have about this team. I still have a lot of questions, but we did pull it out, so we'll take that. I want to say, too, we're not going to overreact yet, okay? We're just not going to. This is basically like preseason. It's like spring training for baseball or preseason, for the NFL. We are just going to allow this to be what it is. We're going to learn a lot, and hopefully this team will continue to get better. It looks like they are on that path. And then just some other player notes here real quickly. I was impressed with Lost. He looked solid. Spica, once he started to feel what seemingly was a little bit more comfortable, looked pretty good too. Huni will have his own section here. We're going to talk about him a little bit later separately. I don't want to reveal too much until we get to that point. But PoE felt a little invisible. I'm going to be honest. Not bad, not good, but invisible. His first and his third games were... His first game was very meh, but so was the whole team. Game 3, he actually didn't look great either. But, he was the one that they were, diving onto a lot, obviously, considering he had 4 of the team's 7 deaths. So, he wasn't able to get out as much, but he was helping to create space in that game, so that's good. And then, in game 2, he looked solid. He got his champions, and it's rare to see him struggle like this, like he did. So, hopefully he'll be okay, but it was a little weird to that. And then, for Sword Art, especially in Game 1, kind of in Game 2, and definitely not in Game 3, he also felt a little bit invisible. But it was like when the team started winning, that's when Sword Art really felt like he was unlocked, unchained, if you want to say, and free to be able to do the things he needed to do. And so I hope that they will rewatch these games. I rewatched them, I think 2 or 3 times now, to a certain degree. I couldn't spend the whole week, rewatching them that many times. But my notes were that when the team started winning, Sword Art started doing well, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So we're going to keep watching out for that. But, we'll take a little deeper dive here into each game. So, Game 1 was just a disaster from the beginning. They, it was only, let me see here, like 3 minutes in, and there's a weird fight where PoE takes a terrible path. Huni gets really aggressive. Spica just, I don't know. None of it looked right. They're up there. They're in the top lane. They're losing this fight. Then they go back in because PoE TP's in, and then DeMonte shows up, and it's just over. And TSM are down 2-1, and they were already starting to lose, in gold and CS. And that was kind of the catalyst. I mean, seriously, it was like right after that, closer goes, he gets Mountain Drake. They just keep scaling, and then, and then Huni dies after 100 Thieves goes and gets Rift Herald, and he just dies, trying to fight Someday, who clearly Renekton is the strongest top laner. I imagine he's going to be permabanned from here on out. I'd be really surprised if he wasn't. And so, yeah, I mean, the team just looked bad. They just bled out, they didn't take any fights. They didn't seem to have any sort of feel for each other. We had been hearing that they had been doing well in scrims, which never seems to mean anything at this point. I mean, they look great in scrims. Oh, they look terrible in scrims. And then the opposite happens where, they end up crushing it, even though they look terrible, or they end up getting their asses handed to them when they looked great. So, I don't really know what to take of scrims anymore. At this point, we could talk about them, but there's nothing that's convincing me that whatever the scrim gods or scrim bucks say will actually happen in game, because either teams just are too nervous when they get into the real thing, or clearly the scrims just didn't matter. I don't know. It was very weird, and this team looked awful. I mean, after game 1, I was like, oh man, this could be a really, really long beginning tournament. I still have faith in this team. I think that they will get it together. And even after this game, I did feel like, hey, like, they made some mistakes in the draft again. I think they got the champions generally that I wanted. I do think that the giving FBI Kai'Sa was a big mistake, and they paid for it. And FBI looked great in that game. He's looked great again all tournament. So, yeah, sad to lose that first one, but I think we can just write it off. Again, I will go into the Huni stuff separately later. Obviously made some bad plays that I think really cost this team, especially in game 1. Then in game 2, there's not a lot to say about just the way that this team handled its business. This was the problem throughout the weekend. They didn't do anything in the early game, and then by 10 minutes, they just start losing. And it's the same freaking thing for even the CLG game. People forget, like, yeah, TSM ended up winning handily, but not till 24 minutes in the CLG game. I know we're looking at the GG game, but it's like there's a common theme. This team really struggles in the early game, and I can't really tell necessarily if it's that their draft isn't working out for them, or maybe they're just not being proactive. I mean, it seems like their draft should have been strong enough in the early game, at least for games 2 and 3, that they should have done a lot better. But they didn't. And, they are consistently losing in CS in most of the lanes. And that's a major problem. Like, we saw it here. I mean, Niles beat Huni by, was 59 CS. Iconic beat Spica by 9 CS. Power of Evil was able to outfarm a Blaze Olive, but he was on Galio. Stixay is up by 37 CS. and that contributes so much to the early game and the pressure that these players can move about the map with. And so it's worrisome to see them struggling so much in lane. And I think it's because they're passive players. This is something I talked about at the beginning of the year. And I know that Brooks brought up a good point. I do think they can be more proactive. I think that they can show that, but they don't seem like they're ready. And in GG game, we saw that. Huni was making mistakes again. Niles was just having a field day with him. Until later in the game, Niles was really carrying along with Iconic. In the end, they were the main reason that that GG was up by so much. But I don't know. It was such a weird game. They're losing big time. I mean, at before they steal the Baron, they are down by 6,000 gold to a team of 2 college kids, a Blaze Olive who hasn't played in the LCS, Stixay who's been arguably the worst AD carry in the LCS, and Newbie who's coming from a region that, sure, he has experience, but he isn't, it's not a major region. He wasn't somebody who everybody was like, oh yeah, Newbie's coming to the LCS. Everybody's like, who's Newbie? And TSM frankly got dominated until Spica was like, all right, I'm done with this. It's time for me to take over. He goes in, he steals the Baron. I rewatched it. Power Vivo also probably had his biggest play of the weekend on this as well, where he was able to get a really, really solid ultimate off, Shockwave as well to really kind of mess things up in the Baron pit, and that turned the game around. TSM kind of stalls out. They get some towers. They actually lose a fight at Drake. But again, Spica comes through, gets another Drake for the team. I think you're seeing I think you're seeing how this goes, and then they're able to go get a Baron, but it also takes a really, really well timed Huni ultimate to keep Niles from absolutely just wrecking this team. And that was the start of his redemption arc. And then, TSM slowly but surely over the next, 14 minutes, just comes back. And once the Baron was stolen, I think that GG, they didn't know what to do. I think that's where the lack of leadership comes in. And TSM has that. They kind of knew what they needed to do. And it was the first time I really felt like comms were going well. They had confidence in what they were doing. They were pushing out the side lanes. They were pressuring the map where they needed to, and then they just won the game. It was really nice. Game 3, a much better game, but again, up until 24 minutes, TSM were down in gold, and it's because, Solo has a 73 gold lead at the end of the game. Griffin was up by 24. Power Vivo was up by 25, and then Lost was down by 2. And again, they didn't look great in the laning phase. Huni especially was getting bullied, but that's expected. He's an Ornn. That's, it's not what we want, but we want him to absorb the pressure from Solo. He didn't die, and he kept himself in the game. And truthfully, objectives were the name of the game in this one. TSM were able to get all four Drakes plus an Elder. They did lose out on a Baron at one point, but that was relatively inconsequential, if I'm being honest. And they just started really working their way back into this game, just through map pressure. They knew they had a really solid team fight. They knew that maybe they couldn't win skirmishes, but if they had to draw CLG to Dragon, that then TSM could win, and we see that, right? It was the early objectives, getting the first 3 Drakes, with not a lot going on in the kill feed, and then, they have a fight at Baron. Again, they lose the Baron. They get a couple kills. They still relatively control the map, and then at that fourth Drake, the team really comes through. They get a full team ace over CLG, and they take the Drake, and I think that's the way that TSM wants to play. They need to have objective control. And maybe it's not as flashy, but that's okay. And they put Huni on a champion that could cover for mistakes in lane. We'll call it that. And again, they looked better. They didn't look great in this third game, but they looked better. Lost all weekend. Once he was able to get on Jhin, by the way, it was like the second that his snare was up, as soon as he saw the opportunity, it was bam, right on it, bam, right on it, bam, right on it. And I was like, oh my God, Lost, you are a madman with this ability. If teams are listening, I'd be careful about giving him that pick, because he looked great. Or I should say he looked really good. He didn't look great all the time. There were some missed opportunities, especially, in the early game. I want to see him be better. He wasn't great in the early game, and that's partially, him and Sword Art getting to know each other a little bit better, but I don't expect them to win lane, but I expect them to at least keep it close. And they didn't look like they were doing that to start. But it was in game 3 where Sword Art was able to get out there and actually roam around, make some plays, use those saplings. I was still surprised that we hadn't seen Maokai. I know that, Leona and Alistar are like the premier supports right now, but it's like, I've seen and read a lot and watched a lot of videos about how strong Maokai is. If I don't really know if he's getting nerfed or not on this patch, but or even if they're playing on 11.2, I'd have to check. But I would like to see Sword Art on some more champions like that. I think this is a really good meta for him. I think he can play Thresh. I think he can play some Set. I know he's not played it much, but I'm sure he can play it. Alistar, Leona, these are great roaming and playmaking supports, and I think that's what we want to see out of Sword Art. We want to see him be that guy who is going to make plays and help this team get ahead. I want to see him work with Spica more and really help create advantages in the mid lane, maybe even in the top lane, and at a minimum the bot lane. So this has been a good start. They've shown resilience, and they walk out of the weekend 2-1 before they face Team Liquid. So, as TSM fans, I think we take that. It could have been a lot worse. Sure, they are wins against GG and CLG, some lower tier teams. CLG was missing Santorin and Finn. Or excuse me, not Santorin. Broxa and Finn. Pobelter didn't look great this weekend. Wild Turtle looked okay, and Smoothie looked awful. So I'm not really worried. Yeah, I get that they're against two of the lower tier teams, but here's the deal. The good teams beat the teams that they're supposed to beat. We will take that every day of the week. So, yeah, 2-1. They're heading into the week. I'm sure they're going to learn a lot from this weekend, and they will be ready to go for the coming weekend's game against TL and then onto the knockout stage. Now, I know I've taken up a lot of time talking about these games, but I really wanted to do a deeper dive. Let me know if you all like these deeper dives. I can dial it back a little bit more and not go over the games as in depth. But let me know. I'm interested to hear what you all have to say. Now we move on to Huni. And this was a conversation on Reddit. I did my 3 takeaways from this weekend, and the one was that Spica was really good. The other was that the early game was a problem, which I talked about, and then that we we shouldn't give up on Huni yet. And there was a lot of people commenting. They're like, well, who was thinking about getting rid of Huni already? And why, why are people, overreacting? And I agree, but I can see their point after the first game and a half. Let's be honest. That first game especially, that man entered off the face of the planet. Okay? 2 TPs right into the middle of people just bashing on a turret really put this team in a bad position. And then, one of the other 4 deaths that he had was the one where, the team had clearly just finished up a Rift Herald, and then he's trying to fight Someday for God knows what reason. Sure, he gets a nice stun, or maybe that was the, now that I'm remembering, I think that was actually the Niles, the Niles game. But, I mean, he's still, with Rift Herald, I believe this was the time when they had just gotten the Rift Herald and they were trying to bash down top turret. And he just, I don't know. I mean, he just looked awful. And normally Gnar is a strong champion for Huni. I mean, we talked about it last week. He's shown success on Gnar. And for some reason, he just looked terrible. And I get, that Gnar hasn't been good in general, and that Renekton's been really strong, and obviously Camille's good too. But he was 19-9 on this champion with a solid KDA. He was a CS machine on him. He looked good. His kill participation was always, not great, but solid. I don't know what to say. I mean, he looked terrible. And he really hurt the team. I mean, honestly, they tried to make up for some of his mistakes, and game 1 was not solely on Huni. The team did not look good as a whole. But I do think that if Huni doesn't int as hard as he did, this team may have had a better chance to come back. I mean, by the time, everybody knew that if they survived until 25 minutes or so without being too far behind, and again, I said, don't lose the early game too hard, don't make too many mistakes, and all they did was make mistakes. And there was no chance for them to come back. There was no chance for them to be proactive. He was way behind. He ended up being, 3K gold behind. And sure, FBI and Damonte ended up beating Power of Evil and lost by more gold, but that's also because they were the ones making plays. Huni died to Damonte, I think twice maybe, or at least Damonte was involved in the kills twice. And, we chalked that up to game 1. We're like, okay, it's game 1. No worries. They pick him Gnar again in game 2, and we're like, all right, let's try this again. Let's see what happens. He looks terrible. I mean, he's getting beat by a kid straight out of college. This is a former world champion finalist and MSI winner who is getting beat by a kid who has never played professional League of Legends. Not even semi-pro, but collegiate. And maybe that's saying more about Niles than it is against Huni. He looked pretty solid this weekend. He didn't look outstanding, but, I do think the way he plays is he likes to lead from the top lane, and I think he made a lot of great shot calling for this team. But either way, this is about Huni. Huni made better plays later in the game. And I think that's something that TSM has to remember because, again, he struggles in game 2, but then in game, at near the end of game 2, the team is still in it because of a Spica, Baron steal. And that allows Huni to make more plays. He gets some good ults in. He helps the team win. He looks better. They put him on Ornn, which it's funny. I was like, hey, guys, why don't they just throw him on Ornn? I was talking to the Talking TSM group, and we all agreed. We're like, yeah, I mean, that would be good. They throw him on Ornn, and guess what? He looks great. Sure, he loses lane, but that's expected against a Renekton. Whatever. But he looks better. He was a CC machine. He was knocking people up. He was slowing people. He was bonking them on the head. He was throwing some magic rams at people. He looked better. He looked more comfortable, even though Ornn is not necessarily a champion that's been in his repertoire. I mean, he's played in 9 games. He's now 10 games, excuse me. He's now 7-3. But most importantly, he gets in there and he helps the team. And truly, I don't think they win that game without Huni. People don't want to hear that, but I think he made some really important plays in that game. I think that the way that he was using the Ornn ultimate was really solid. He still was able to try to catch up somewhat in CS. I mean, it wasn't great, but he had as much CS as a Graves. We take that, and yes, I know Ornn is strong. I know Ornn is probably still a P. I'm sure he's going to be back in the meta consistently. But I want to see them give him more champions like that. Or I want to see them, give him Gnar. Or not Gnar, God. Definitely don't give him Gnar. I think it's hilarious that they banned Gnar. But don't give him Gnar. Give him Rumble. Give him GP. They were both open. If I'm TSM, if I'm Bjergsen, the man is... Here are your champions, Huni. You are going to get Ornn, GP, Rumble, or maybe like a Sion or something. I don't even think Sion's meta, but just something else tanky in the top lane. Cho'Gath, or Shen, or Maokai. Maokai's pretty solid. Why not give him Maokai in the top lane? Malphite's available too. I'd rather him build tankier on Malphite, but the point stands. Give him something tanky. Give him something that he can team fight and really help create opportunities for him and the team. Gnar just wasn't doing it. He was constantly getting into fights without his rage bar filled. He was constantly messing up Gnar ultimates until the very last part of the second game. And I'd say throw that champion out the window, never pick him again for Huni, and, put him on champions that he's comfortable with, on ones that he is able to play smarter with and be able to make up for his mistakes. And I think that this team will be a lot better off because we saw it. That 2-0-10 scoreline, he had the best KDA behind Lost in Game 2. Best KDA in the game behind Lost. And that's outstanding. That's what we want out of Huni. He can be that guy who can set his team up. He is proactive. This team needs that, and that's fine. I want him to be aggressive. We should all want him to be aggressive, but we don't want him to be stupid. And that's not an insult to him. I'm sure there were, a lot of things going through his mind. It's his first game. He knows there's a lot of expectations. TSM always comes with high expectations, period. It doesn't matter how good of a player you've been. It doesn't matter if you've ever even played the game at a high level before. If you come on TSM, you're going to have extra pressure. And I want to chalk up the first game and a half to the pressure. He's trying to make plays, and they were just stupid, period. I mean, I'm sorry. It's just they were the wrong calls. They were not good plays. They were the Huni that everybody was afraid of. But it's nowhere near time to give up on him. Not even close. Anybody can play Ornn. That's fine. I don't know that Hanser's going to make the same plays that Huni did. I'm going to be honest, guys. I don't think he is. Huni will be fine. We just got to give him time. The team looked bad the first game and a half. And sure, Huni was a catalyst specifically in Game 1. Not as much in Game 2. Yeah, he made a couple bad plays, but so did everybody on that team. At least up until Spica saved the day. So, let's not panic. Let's be honest with ourselves. Huni Huni's ceiling is still higher than most of the top laners in the LCS. We just have to be patient and give him some time. This is just the preseason. Yes, Haunter's there for a reason, but it's not time to pull that trigger yet. It's probably not going to be time to pull that trigger until, maybe even week 2 of the regular season, maybe week 3. All right, so we've had our honest conversation about Huni. We'll see what happens going forward. We will hope that the coaching staff has learned no more Gnar. I don't care if he's sitting there screaming it, we need to pick Gnar. No, Huni, we are not picking Gnar. And the LCS should just be like, yeah, we're not picking Gnar. Let's look forward to the TL game. This one's going to be interesting. It looks like Santorin's going to be here. He hasn't really been able to practice as much with the team. I know he's been able to practice, but overseas, and that gets complicated. But, TLs look solid. Their only loss is to 100 Thieves, similar to TSM. And Alphari looks like a man possessed. I should say that is reserved for Impact. Impact looks like he is pissed off and ready to murder anything that stands in his way on this Summoner's Rift. Alphari looks like a little bit more of a controlled version, but he has still been playing out of his mind good. And he's been doing it by winning lane and then taking his advantages from there into the rest of the game. And for us, we just talked about Huni, and Huni has looked awful in lane. He's actually been probably the worst top laner in lane thus far, which is saying a lot considering the top laners that are in this game right now. So that's going to be the matchup to watch. Truly, that's going to be the one everybody's going to want to talk about. Oh, Jensen versus PoE. And yes, I talked about that plenty. I wrote a big old piece comparing the three of them and their strengths and their weaknesses. And I think that will be a good matchup. But both of them are pretty passive. Doubt we're going to see any lane kills. It's going to be them trying to pressure elsewhere. Huni versus Alphari is going to be interesting. And, I worry because I do think that Alphari is a good enough player that he can just absolutely stomp and carry a game if he has to. And if Huni plays the way that he did against... Sunday's really good, but he didn't look very good this weekend. But, I don't know. I don't know how else to say this. If Huni plays the way he did against Sunday and against Niles, I have a very distinct feeling that Alphari will absolutely mess everything and everybody up. And he looked really solid. He brought out the Camille, one of his favorite champions, and just bashed in all of CLG's heads. And he just made it look easy. And then he picks the Renekton. He looks solid, but Someday, played really well too. I think that's going to be a great matchup to watch going forward throughout the rest of the season. But then he pulls out the GP. And man, oh man, he made Niles look really not... He reminded us that Niles was a collegiate player. And, I don't really know what you do against him. If I'm TSM, I'm hoping that you get Ornn. If not, then we'll have to see. And if he gets Ornn, then you got to hope that they either don't pick GP or you just got to ban it and then try to first pick. So we'll see, what they decide to do there. But that's going to be a rough matchup to watch for. Bot lane's going to be interesting too. Core JJ and Tactical have already looked outstanding. In most regards. So they're going to be they'll put the pressure on Lost and Sword Art. Lost and Sword Art are going to have to step up in this game. But the key for TSM is 100% going to be Spica, which is probably going to be what we're saying a lot this season. And the reason is, again, Santorin's coming in. He hasn't played with the team much. And yes, Santorin is an extremely good jungler. This team is very good. And TSM, sadly, are the first team that are going to have to face them at full strength. I would have loved to have faced them when they were with Armao/Greg. But sometimes the dice just don't get rolled in your favor. And you got to, I guess another gambling reference, you got to deal with the hand that you're given, right? And so this is going to be a really big test for TSM. And I think if they can walk out of this game with a win, it's going to be because Spica was able to affect the map in a much more positive way than he did, at least in the early game. Sure, he looked great again. Late game was solid for him. Mid game was pretty good for him too, but his early game, he didn't do much. And I know that farming jungling is the thing right now, but for a team that needs a spark early on, it's going to have to come from him. Power Evil's not going to be that person. Huni may be that person, but he also may, jump into a pit of 5 people and die instantly. And I think that the bot lane is going to be a little bit more lane focused / passive right now until they get to know each other better and until they can communicate a little bit better. We saw as the weekend went on, obviously the Sword Art was roaming a little bit more. I would like to see him do that, but I don't know if he'll get the Maokai again. So we'll just have to see, what they do. But that'll be a fun matchup. But again, it's going to hinge on Spica doing well and Huni not getting beat really hard by Alfari. If they can do that, I think that they can find some good team fights and win the game late, around 35 minutes or so. Or they're going to get beat within 25 because Huni's not going to look good potentially, or the bot lane is going to get in trouble, and then Power Evil's not going to be really able to do his thing, and Spica will be too far behind because he's trying to cover for lanes, and it rolls out of control. So we will have to see what happens there, but I know that that's playing both sides of the coin, but I mean that's truly what's going to happen. There's not really much of a middle ground, I don't think. I don't think that there's this, or I should say, I don't see a third option where TSM stomps. I think it's either going to be close or TL will stomp. And it hurts me to say that as a TSM fan. They're just a better team right now in terms of coordination and honestly talent. So TSM's going to have to really do their thing and play really well and have a solid draft and get a lot out of Spica and lean on him for right now until things kind of pick up. So, especially right now. That's just how it's going to have to be for now. We'll see as the season goes on if TSM are going to be able to match up well against TL or C9. Maybe there's something that I'm missing where they have a big advantage. But at best, I see them at a disadvantage in the top lane, a very small disadvantage in the jungle, a push in the middle, and a potentially large disadvantage in the bot lane, but more likely will be a small disadvantage. And hey, a couple small disadvantages is not enough to really push any team out of a game. So, or maybe I'm just a huge TSM fanboy and I'm being super optimistic. I know some TL friends and fans who listen to this, and they will tell me that more than likely. You know who you are. Feel free. Bring it on. Yeah, we're going to look at, who else. I was going to look at who else they could play in the knock-in stage or knockout stage. And I got really confused. There were too many possibilities. Essentially, funny enough, it might be better if we lose. Well, no, actually, now that I think about it, no. We definitely want to win because we either want to be the 1 or 2 seed. If we get the 3 seed and Golden Guardians, well, it doesn't matter. Basically, if we lose, we get the 3 seed. And if Cloud9 loses, then there's actually a chance that we play Dignitas because that will have meant that Dignitas pulled out the miracle and beat C9. But what is more likely to happen is C9 will win, and then we get to face the new C9 and Perks in the first round of the knockout stage in a best of 3. And that series will hopefully be very fun. I will hope that TSM pulls that one out. I don't know yet. And I can't really talk about it because there's just too many possibilities. I will say, I think if we play C9, I think we sadly lose 2-1. But they also have not looked very good yet. Fudge has been super underwhelming. Perks has not been as dominant as I thought he would be. And it's actually been Sven and Blabber and Vulcan just carrying the load right now. So, we'll have to see what happens. We should really hope that we play, like FlyQuest or Dig or somebody else. It's pretty unlikely that we play EG. Actually, I think it's impossible. I think they already locked in the 1 seed. So, yeah. No, we definitely can't play EG. So, it's either going to be Cloud9 or Dignitas, basically. And, you got to beat the best to be the best. And if you would have asked me during the summer playoffs if TSM really had a chance to do what they did, I honestly would have told you no. And I'm really glad I was wrong, obviously. And I'm very comfortable being wrong because if I was right all the time, it wouldn't be any fun. No, I'm just kidding. In all seriousness, because you just never know. There's a saying in the NFL that's, any given Sunday, meaning that any team can come out and beat another team even if they're not expected to, right? And not that TSM are in a position where it's like, we got to hope that it's our Sunday that we beat them. But it's more of they're going to need some things to go their way. And they're going to need C9 to make some mistakes. And we saw that C9 are definitely capable of that. 3 of the players that they have, it's not like, in my opinion at least, it's not like Niski and Licorice were like the main causes of their weird loss streak last year. But we'll have to see. If they play C9, it'll be a really nice test to see what this team can do, how the new coaches for both sides can draft. And yeah, I still think Cloud9 probably come out 2-1, but I do think TSM put up a really good fight. Weirdly enough, I would think actually that TSM's best advantage would probably be in the top lane with Huni over Fudge, because Fudge has not looked very comfortable. So maybe they play a top map game at that point. I don't know. Either way, we have a lot to look forward to. It's been a good start to the tournament so far, and it's just nice to have TSM League of Legends back. We're going to head into the question of the week. Do you think we're going to do another champion one? Do you think TSM let their opponents get Talia? I don't know if Spica can play Talia. I'm sure he's been probably practicing her, but she really gave TSM a hard time, and they had a big problem with champions being able to get across the map very quickly. We saw the Talia ban in Game 3, and I think that helped them a lot. So, yeah, question is, do you think TSM lets their opponents get Talia at all this weekend? Let me know in the comment section below or on Reddit. Whew, that was a lot to go through. All right, this show went about 20 minutes longer than I expected. So, sorry, guys, but there's just so much to go over with these games, especially with 3 now. I think with 2, I could have made it to 35 minutes or so, but 3 games every week. There's a lot of stuff to go into. I don't know if this show's going to be a half hour anymore. It might be closer to 45 minutes to an hour. So, I hope you guys are still listening, and I hope you're enjoying it. And if you have questions or comments or want to rip me open for some of my opinions, let me know. I'm always happy to talk them out with you. But yeah, if you like this show, Take a second to like, subscribe, and comment if you're watching on our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the bell icon so you don't miss another episode. Also, real quick, if you are a fan of other teams, specifically Cloud9 or Team Liquid, please go give a look to my boy Brian Rockwood and my other boy Thomas Baker. They will be covering C9 and TL respectively. Expect them to potentially have something like this show coming out here over the next couple weeks. So if you're a fan of either of those teams, go support them. They're going to be great. I promise. They are very smart individuals and very knowledgeable about League of Legends. I would absolutely go give them a follow and just follow this channel because they're going to be on the YouTube channel. They'll also be on podcasts as well. I want to make this show specifically, though, the #1 TSM podcast on all podcasting platforms. So if you feel so inclined, please leave a review, especially if you're listening on Apple. I very much appreciate it. Also, please share this with your friends. I've had a couple of people who've shared it with their friends, and now some of them are even in our Draft Buff League. So, you can do that. I will obviously be extremely appreciative. I just really like talking TSM with the people. That's why it's the name of the show. You can find the official tweet if you're on Twitter, either on my account at TGH Robert Haynes. Go give me a follow. Or the Gamehouse's Twitter account, TGH Esports. Also go give us a follow there. And use the hashtag TalkingTSM if you're tweeting at us or sharing. Lastly, please head to thegamehouse.com and head to the TSM page. I am writing about TSM every week there. I will be giving, my 3 takeaways. I'll be doing some previewing. I'll be talking about, some other stuff too once I get a little bit more into a groove as the season goes on. So, make sure you give that a look. And now I say goodbye. Thank you for tuning in. As a reminder, this show comes out every Thursday and is exclusively for your TSM earholes. I'm Robert Haynes, and this has been Talking TSM. See you next week.